NERDSoul.
Hi everybody, my name is Victoria Renee Hand, and I am moderating today for the music panel. I'm so happy to be here. I'm really excited. This is my first time at Comic-Con, so what's up? Ooh. Yeah, thank you. So I'm gonna basically let these guys introduce themselves. We have Evan Forrester right here. We have Gary Phillips. We have Ben Jackendorf. Yeah, your nickname. And then Chris Longo and Davian Watkins. So I'm going to go ahead and give it to Evan. You want to go ahead and tell everybody who you are and why you're here, Evan?
Perfect. You got the levels, buddy? He's working on levels. All right.
Yeah, I project.
I'm Evan Forster. Welcome, everybody. We're so happy for you guys all to come today to our panel. I'm a music and film producer and also owner of Superfans, which is the first gamification of discovering talent. And we're really happy to be here with you guys. And this is the first time I'm speaking at Comic-Con, but I've been to like 2 or 3 with Davian. So very excited to be here, and pass it on to my man, G.
Thank you, Batman.
I'm Bane.
Hi, my name is Gary Phillips. I'm mostly a writer. I also work in TV. I'm a writer, co-producer on the show called Snowfall about crack in the CIA. But yeah, I guess in the context of that, which is set, right, give it up for crack. Thank you, folks. That's great. What an audience for the kids. Yeah, right. But in the context of that, our show is set in the '80s, and so we're very cognizant of the music that we put into the show. And I'll also say that in terms of the comic book world, a couple of years ago, I did a graphic novel with Dale Berry called The Bebop Barbarians. It's set in the late 50s, and jazz is very much a part of that story.
What's up? I go by B. Earl. I used to be Ben Jackendorf, but I changed my name. I'm B. Earl. So in the music side of things, I have a company with Taboo from Black Eyed Peas. We actually met here at Comic-Con in 2017 on a project called Masters of the Sun. So if you guys were here in 2017, we were signing at the Marvel booth, and we did the Masters of the Sun project that came out with Marvel. And Taboo and I now have been writing with Marvel for the past 3+ years. We did Werewolf by Night, which has a TV episode coming out. So, and then we also did Kashala. She's the spirit rider and Sorcerer Supreme, and we are currently writing the Deadly Neighborhood Spider-Man. So I don't know, that was brought up I think at the 60 years, so I think they were talking about it yesterday, I think, that panel. So our issue 1 drops on October, I think 19th, this coming October, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, I'm in the music space as well with Taboo, and we got some cartoons that got music in them and all that fun stuff. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Chris.
Very cool.
Hi, I'm Chris Longo, and I have a free magazine for anybody who can guess where I work.
Woo! Heavy Metal
the first
magazine.
No, you don't count, Berkowitz. Whoever said it first, honor system, come up and get a magazine.
There you go.
No, I'm the associate publisher and chief sales officer of Heavy Metal Magazine, which is an absolute thrill. I've been with the company for 3 years, and I also own a marketing agency that's all about fandom called Modern Fanatic. You got it, buddy. I like your hat. And I'll pass it to Davian.
Hi, everybody. I'm Davian Watkins. I'm a creator. I created this character named Notes. He's a music superhero based on some of the experiences that Evan and I actually had in the music industry, working with recording artists. And we actually got published in the Culver City Observer. If you're ever in Culver City, you can go out there and check out the Culver City Observer, free newspaper, to check out our Notations comic strip, and we're going to be talking a little bit about that when we get into it.
Yeah, I can't wait to get into that further. It's very exciting stuff. So I'm going to start with the first question. So listen carefully. Okay, so think of a favorite elderly grandmother, aunt, or uncle. How would you describe what you do to them in a way that they could understand? It's like, right? It's a complicated business, you guys.
Well, can I jump in?
Yeah.
I can tell you that my most frequent conversations with my family members about what I do for a living always starts with, "What do you do for a living again?" So now it's much easier now that I can just say I'm the associate publisher of Heavy Metal Magazine. At least they understand it's a magazine, but they don't get what heavy metal is. They don't get this world at large, and that's fine. You know, you have to be here to get it to some extent, but it is confounding to a lot of people, and I'm sure you in particular. You know, you have to explain that away all the time.
Yeah. Well, I think, I mean, I agree. Like, you know, it's always, until I started writing with Marvel, before it was like, oh, you work in movies and this and that. Nobody ever really knows exactly or like what you're doing or what is a producer? Oh, are you directing? And
There's so many jobs that are involved.
Yeah, so it's always so challenging to really describe exactly what you do. And I think I've just boiled it down to we're storytellers. Like at the end of the day, we're telling stories. And whatever medium that is in, that's a medium of delivery. So we're communicating stories in some sort of fashion.
There's so many people that are involved in getting the whole picture completed. You have the music people, you have the drawing people, you have the storyboard people, you have the producers, you have the directors. There's a lot involved. So you're right, it is hard to explain to people what exactly your involvement is.
Well, Victoria, you were Cinderella, so you were a character. She was Cinderella on Broadway, and as an actress and singer. What do you tell the kids and your grandparents? What do you tell them?
I play pretend for a living. I dress up. I never stop dressing up. That's my job. Singing and dancing and playing dress up.
And for me, I mean, I put music in movies and film. We were the first to put music in video games, my brothers and I, and that was pretty exciting. But like you said, you know, we make people happy through music, and in all different facets of the entertainment industry and all different facets of content. So when I'm explaining to anybody, I have a guy that has asked me for the last 35 years, what exactly do you do? And I manage talent, so I used to manage Lauryn Hill and Andra Day and worked with Erykah Badu and major artists and film artists, mostly female artists like Victoria. I manage Victoria, but that's like a management job is different than most jobs in our business because you're constantly trying to enable and empower the creative process and the creators. So that's really what I do. But I'm excited to be here with you guys. So, and G Money.
No, well, this has always come up in the past with my aunts and cousins and such, and so. But the easiest thing was because I've also published novels, so you could just show them a book. Because you try to explain comics or you try to explain, you know, writing scripts. That's a little harder to kind of get your head around. But the idea that or even comics was harder to get your head around it. But the idea that you had a book actually kind of was, you know, because you could touch it,
tangible.
It's tangible, and it's a thing. And so beyond that, you know, which they also thought was just a hobby, but that's fine. And so it always worked out, at least to that degree.
That's true.
The other challenge too with comics, you know, especially, I mean, like now it's changed, the perception's changed a lot, but like early on when I was first getting into it, you know, and especially with your parents, it's like they think comics are just for kids.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's always like a big thing. And then when you go, no, they're for adults too, then they think it's porn. So like you're like, whoa, wait. Like, we don't have to go to one extreme or the other. It's not, you know.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, like in particular, I mean, I know we're talking about music and comics, and I think, you know, what's really cool, like, you know, obviously with heavy metal too, like as a kid growing up, I was like into heavy metal, and then that also got me into the magazine. You know, and I think there's just so many cool opportunities that music and comics have. And when we did like Masters of the Sun, you know, it was scored with will.i.am and Hans Zimmer did the score.
Cool.
So like you actually could read the book and then you could scan it with the AR app and there was music playing with it. Like it was like next level. We were so far ahead of the curve with that project. But like that's now where it's coming in, like this whole transmedia, AR, VR, the metaverse, all this crazy stuff. And I think there's a lot of really great opportunity because we're going into a much more connective tissue space. And I think that's why like this panel is interesting because we can look at music and comics in like a more holistic way. And I think, you know, you could put like music to your heavy metal metal magazine that, you know, is really driving the story forward as well. And I think there's a lot
It's
of
opening doors that weren't there to open before.
You know, one thing I pushed for when I started at Heavy Metal, and we just, you know, a whole laundry list of things we had to do before this, so that's why it took forever. But I was insistent upon the fact that, we needed to build community and we needed to build some connections to music that were 100% organic. Heavy metal as an entity has some really accidental connections with music. A lot of people on the surface remember heavy metal as a metal magazine, which it's not. It's an illustrated sci-fi fantasy horror magazine. Some people have a connection to heavy metal from the 1981 animated movie, and because that had such a successful, iconic soundtrack, people associate heavy metal and music that way, even though the soundtrack has very little heavy metal music on it. It's like Stevie Nicks and Blue Oyster Cult are on there, and there's very little actual metal. I don't want to say we take advantage of some of those crossed wires, but we certainly try and clarify things with our audience, and when we do things that are music-centric, we try and make sure they're coming from a very organic and understandable place. So one of the things that we're just instituting now is if you're on Spotify, you can follow a Heavy Metal Magazine Spotify profile, and we're going to be creating every week playlists for all of our ongoing stories that are curated by the Heavy Metal editorial team and by the creators who work on individual projects with us. So it's basically like fantasy soundtracks or the music that, Brian Posehn was listening to when he created the acts for us, things like that. So we're going to be having fun with a lot of that stuff. And I think that's the way you make those connections. If you bend it or try to make it happen in an inauthentic way, our fans are going to know and they're going to call us on it.
Yeah, that's true. It kind of calls for itself, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Davian, you were about to
I was
say.
just going to say that if I was to tell my aunt what I do, I go to these conventions, I buy these T-shirts, I sell these T-shirts. It's all about, the music and how, we kind of incorporate this into our everyday lives. And we wouldn't even communicate. I think that there was a transmedia storyteller who once said the shortest distance between a man and a woman is a story. So when we're kind of communicating, this is how, different artists have different unique aspects or ways that they kind of incorporate their lives into a group or into, how we get together. But now we're together again. I think this is something that we're talking about how music inspires our lives.
I love that idea.
I think something interesting about that too, what you're saying, David, is about like how music is a universal language.
It is.
And then you have visual arts are a universal language as well. So you can have, a visual medium, which is comics, and then you can have music, which conveys the feeling and emotion, connecting those two. And you don't really have to have words. I mean, that's one of my biggest challenges is writing comic books. I usually overwrite it and then I go through, and especially when I get back from the, for our letter pass, and I'm like, okay, I go to my editor, I'm like, okay, cut out all of my words here, cut out all this here. Like in this Deadly Neighborhood Spider-Man, there's one page that has no words whatsoever. And I love those kinds of pages where you can just kind of feel like the art, especially when you work with an incredible artist. Tab and I are working with this guy, Juan Ferreira. So you in the comic space, if you know Juan, I mean, he is phenomenal. So
awesome.
just go out and get Juan's stuff because that guy is an incredible visual
He's the man.
artist.
I think Davian, when he created Notes, was really interesting because, like we just said about it's a universal language, but it can also changes your mood. It's an emotional connection, and one of the things that we talk about when we're talking about music and how it's very tribal, but it was like war chants. So you knew when there's music that was playing that an army was coming and all this stuff. So
when the shark's about to bite you in Jaws.
And when
Yeah.
Davian was creating Notes, and I thought it was interesting because we were also going through the piracy phase. So Duplicate is also one of his characters, and Notes can change your perception. So when you're talking about like Snowfall and all of the aggressiveness from 90s hip hop, which is really the spawn from the 80s and 90s, and Davian was coming out with these characters, and by spreading goodwill through the music,
Yeah.
it would change your perception.
That was a
So I
pivotal
thought that
moment
was
in history in general.
I thought that was very interesting on where he came from because Davian, growing up here in Los Angeles, he saw a bunch of stuff that whether he agreed with or didn't agree with, growing up, very civil strife going on, especially at that time. The gangs were at war, and if you remember, if you lived out here, there was from the Bloods and the Crips, and they're coming together, and they had the truce. And it was very instrumental how music and all the guys got together from Ice-T and these guys, they all got together and had the truce. Well, music was a large component in that. So when he was coming out with notes, I thought it was so genuine that it is part of the fabric of everything that we do in society, and it's infused in comics, it's infused in gaming. We put music in like Saw, the movie Saw, so we music supervised some of the cutting edge movies back in the day, and all the way through. It was a lot of fun. So
That's awesome. Yeah, can you talk a little bit more about notes and using music as a superpower?
Well, Notes was kind of just a result of what happened to the music industry. And in the origins of Notes, which is a different story from my comic strip, we're kind of talking about the piracy and how he's battling the bootlegger. So he's saving the music while we have a arch nemesis named Duplicate.
Get it?
Right? And so, well, they're battling back and forth, trying different schemes to kind of just, take out the music. From Evan, I think one of the big deals was, and even Ben would probably understand because of the fact that it was a big deal. A lot of people was bootlegging. A lot of people were kind of downloading and streaming music. So it was illegal. I took a chance, put out a character named Notes when everybody was still doing that, while even Duplicate might have been even more popular. I kind of stayed steadfast and made sure that Notes was still in the public eye, and that the hero always wins.
I love it. And music is such a powerful thing. I don't know if you guys even know this. I recently saw a thing on the Discovery Channel where it actually can physically change the color and the shape of your cells in your body. So when people use music for healing, it's a real thing. Yeah. That's a physical, scientifically proven thing. So it's not only emotional connection to film and comics, but it can raise your whole vibe.
holistic, yeah.
Right. So I'll go to my next question. So one writer posted his top 10 comics that celebrate music. They included Hip Hop Tree, Phonogram, The Fifth Beatle, Little Depressed Boy, and Scott Pilgrim. Do you have a favorite? What is it and why?
Who are we looking at?
You guys are
Who wants to go?
Tell me this question again.
Hip Hop Family Tree? Yo, Hip Hop Family Tree.
Who are your favorite comics and why?
I love
basically?
that. Hip Hop Family Tree. If you haven't read Ed Pisker's Hip Hop Family Tree and you like hip hop, or just you don't even have to like hip hop. It's an incredible series. Like that is such an incredible series, and Ed Pisker is such an amazing artist and storyteller. Like, go out and get the Hip Hop Family Tree.
And you mentioned The Fifth Wheel. That's a fantastic book. Like that is just top of the line.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
No,
Did you
I'll
research?
check it out.
Did you research them?
Yeah,
I
he
can't-
did.
I'm blanking on the creators right now, which is terrible. But I think it was a trilogy of stories called Bluesman, and it followed this guy like in the late 30s, early 40s, and I actually think it was a couple of European guys that got translated, into English. But I really thought, because I'm really into that period and this whole, mythology, Robert Johnson, The Devil at the Crossroads. I'm a big fan. Nobody would know this guy, Charlie Patton. I think he only maybe recorded, I think there's maybe only one extant photograph of Charlie Patton, and I used him in a novel of mine, and sort of this mythical search for this guy, and he was a very interesting guy. He was kind of a slight guy, and he was a sort of mixed parentage, and black, Indian, white. He had this gravelly voice, and then somehow or another, of course, as these things happened, he got sliced in the throat. He didn't die, and the voice got even more gravelly. Right, yeah. But he was an influence on Robert Johnson. He was an influence on Sonny Boy Williamson, and so it's that kind of crazy search in America's past, in America's black past, of these bluesmen, these blues women who didn't get a lot of recognition, and who actually kind of sort of, recorded music is still happening, but they didn't quite get the sort of mythology that some of the others who came after them did, and yet they're the ones that helped fuel that. And so anyway, so this comic, three-part sort of graphic novel called Bluesman, I thought was very, it really meant a lot to me, only because I thought it touched on all those kinds of tropes that I've been kind of chasing and sort of incorporating here and there in some of my work. So yeah, that was a big influence.
And then Gary, you actually inspired me just recently too when we were talking about just kind of floating some ideas around before this panel. If you guys ever get a chance, there's a YouTube video at NERDSoul podcast, and we were just talking about a character named Hypno Hustler, who's
It's a terrible, terrible character.
music character that kind of like gave me some just like some things to think about in the future.
What did Hypno Hustler do?
The Hypno Hustler shows up in that I forget. I think it's Peter. Oh, I know where it is. Peter Parker, Spectacular Peter Parker, Spider-Man. Is it either number 24 or whatever it is? It was like during the disco era.
Yeah.
And his power was, of course, him, and he had the 3 backup singers, right? And he could hypnotize you with his guitar licks. He had these hypno goggles, and this character is so terrible, such a grade Z character. But he shows up now and then. He showed up in one of the Deadpool comics, and they reincorporated him, and he's in, I think, in one of the video games too. So I mean, because the character's so bad, it's good.
I might have to bring him back.
Right, yeah.
I got a couple more issues to write, so I'm
Bring it back. That sounds. I'm gonna get into that. That sounds interesting. Hilarious. All right. So we were speaking about how music and comics come together. What can we expect in the future, and who is innovating in this space? Besides all of you, including all of you.
I can tell you who I think does the gold standard, Z2 Comics.
Yeah, they're great.
Z2 Comics, very smart folks over there. What they do is they make really compelling comics out of either the history of, the background of, or just sort of mythology built around bands. Yeah. So they've done comics for the Grateful Dead and Sublime, and they must
Cypress
have
Hill.
like Cypress Hill, Cheech and Chong, even though it's not exactly music, but highly creative, beautiful books, not floppy comics. They're all hardback books. You should check out what Z2's doing.
Yeah, and look at what's coming from the Wu-Tang in the next several months to next year. There's going to be a game coming out that's deal with. I don't know if we're allowed to break the news, but Wu-Tang just did a deal with one of the major interactive companies. They'll be launching a game and a whole series coming out.
Very nice.
So look for that. There's also there was a group of guys that I met years ago that came out with a graphic novel, the Reese Brothers. I don't know if any of you guys saw this. It was called the Omega Nexus, and it was incredible, in depth, like you're saying, about the history, the lineage, all the backstory of these characters, and I thought that was very creative on the way they were incorporating music in the comics. So I think a lot of guys are out there, just got to search for them.
That's right.
And I think I'm pretty sure Z2 has a booth out here because I passed it.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
The music group out here?
No, the Z2.
Got it. Right. Yeah.
Well, it's always, speaking about writing music into comics, right? Like, that's always such a challenge.
Ooh,
So,
yeah.
I mean, one of the things, like with Werewolf by Night, one of the ideas that we came up with was that actually the way to calm our main hero, Jake Gomez, was using a playlist. And that was like how this girl, like his best friend, she used this playlist to like ramp him up, to get all hype up. So we put like System of a Down on his playlist.
I love
and
it.
stuff.
I love it.
It's silly. But I mean, it's fun to kind of see how you can actually incorporate it into the storytelling without, actually having to have a soundtrack to listen to. Because I think that's always a challenge too. Because it'd be like, all right, we got this soundtrack and it comes with the comic and you can listen to it. But I know they did that with Spine-Tingling Spider-Man. There was like a song that was written for the Infinity comic. So you can actually go and listen to the song and it tied into the actual storytelling, which I thought was pretty cool.
Specific lyrics.
Yeah. So I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunities where you can weave the music actually into the comic book experience, which I think there's still a lot of, I think there's still a lot of uncharted territory there. Like, we haven't really touched on that. And I think that's, to me, what's most exciting about comics and music. I think we haven't really seen what can be done in that sort of transmedia way,
That's so true. I feel like there's been a lot of songs that have been made specifically for the movies, and I feel like those just really hit. Like, when I hear, obvious example, but on the nose, but like the Titanic song, you're like, okay, instantly when you hear that, you're drawn back to the movie. It helps to create a connection between music and the products that you guys are creating, the comics, the films, TV, digital, magazines, everything. It's like a really important part of what people walk away feeling with when they're done reading it or listening to it.
Right? Yeah, as a reader of comics, I don't know if you're, my panelists here, if you have a different experience, but, you pretty much take the comic while you're reading it, and you're filling in the gaps in your head, right? So I don't know if you're consciously aware of this, but I try and lean into it. It's like I hear the voices of the characters in my head. So it's really weird when you read a comic and you love it, and then you go see a film or TV adaptation, and you're like, that guy doesn't sound right to me. But I can look at comics, and I have this habit when I'm reading comics, I'm usually listening to music at the same time. And I can't the associations are so strong. Like I can't look at a panel of Love and Rockets without hearing my worn out Pixies Doolittle tape that I listened to over and over again on my Walkman when I was in high school. But I think it's really interesting that like now you're at a point with technology and services like Spotify where you can actually sort of architect all that stuff to work together individually and create your own head soundtrack.
And of course, there's these venues like Graphic Audio, right, which does the sort of full cast kind of things. On, some of the on the comics and everything, and you have music and sort of woven through that stuff. So I think a lot of that can be very compelling.
Well, there's the new format of webtoons or webcomics, right? Like so, we did that when I was mentioning the spine-tingling Spider-Man was an Infinity comic, and we did one of those Infinity comics, which it's always interesting to write to because you're kind of writing a movie because you're scrolling up on the phone. So when we were writing it, it was like you have these long tracking shots, and things like that. But there's opportunities where you can weave in the music in it. I know Webtoons has that. I think Sanford Green, or I don't know, there was like, I'm blanking on the Webtoon, but there was like sound effects and music, and you could like scroll through the, and so there is like a cinematic approach coming into these digital comics, like the Webtoons, and I think Webtoons like Tapas, like companies like Tapas and Webtoon are really taking the lead in this space. And I know Webtoon, like I think they're making a lot of money. Their creators are making a lot of money doing this and really innovative. So I think that's a space to watch in comics and music.
I love that. I love how Deadpool has music that you would just not expect at all for that scene. Like he's slow motion fighting people, and it's like the Ave Maria, or like, completely really interesting contrast. I love how it's like progressing into something that's a little bit more interesting than everything that we're expecting. Like I know to be scared because you're playing hex chords, because you're playing minor chords. I get that. It kind of almost tells you how you should feel, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, I agree. I've tried to get a Julie Andrews tune into one of the Snowfall shots, but they won't let me do it.
She can sing.
Oh my
She
God.
can sing it for you.
I'll do it.
That's right.
I'm obsessed
I
with
was
her.
having lunch. I was having lunch one day at Universal, and Steven Spielberg was there, and he was talking with Quincy Jones, and
Flex.
I was just total on cloud nine, just seeing these two guys in the same place, and I walked over and I introduced myself, and I said I'm running the West Coast for Universal Music Group at the time, and Steven Spielberg said the most important thing about a movie is the music, and I thought that was just awesome. Just to hear that little tidbit, just to give me like a little pump on the chest that music is very important. And fortunately, I had one of the biggest artists with Erykah Badu at the time, and I didn't realize how much when you're with one of the biggest directors in the world, or the biggest director in the world, and they were having that conversation. He was looking at Quincy, telling him that's the most important part of his movies.
Wow.
So, music is something I'm very proud to be a part of, and I'm glad you're one of our artists.
Thank you. Can you tell he's my manager? He's a manager as a personality type. I always joke.
There you go. She's the queen. She's the Queen Vic, by the way, at the office.
Yeah, hello. So I totally agree. You guys have seen some, like the whole revolution of music for the 80s and the 90s and between the political aspect of it to actually working with some of the greatest artists of all time. And then I know you were doing branding with comics and music, right? Can you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So when my comics career started in the late 90s when I started working for DC Comics and Warner Brothers. Thank you.
DC
and I had a very unique job in that organization in that my job was to basically work with outside brands and leverage the company's creative capabilities on their behalf. So the idea would be we would go out and sell the talents of our editorial team, of our writers and artists who are in our stable, and say we can make a comic based upon your brand, your cereal, your mascot, anything, and we used comics as an example of a highly effective marketing tool. So if you wrap a very soft message into a compelling comic book and give it to somebody to read, which they will read and reread if it's a good piece, the brand winds up getting a bigger lift out of that association than they would a typical ad. So I created comic books for the likes of like Lego and pharmaceutical companies, and you can find a comic book out there where I got Batman and Robin taking Claritin. Like, it's just, I'm not kidding.
I'm like, I remember
that.
What's the pharmacy?
That's a collector's item.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was all over the map, and the rule of thumb there was always for the company, and it's still something that it's in my head every single day, is like, if you remove the brand from the comic, you should still be able to read it and enjoy it. It should still hold up. If it was just generic brand X, or no brand at all, and it was just a story, it should still be able to be a good read. So if you can weave the brand in softly and subtly and just let it kind of sit in the background and present the material, then that's the way forward. That's how you do it successfully.
Yeah, that's fail-proof. If it can hold its own, and then you add the artist on top, is just like a little cherry, but didn't really need it. You know?
I mean, we did a program with Subway, and I had to spend about 2 weeks explaining to them why Superman is never going to eat a Subway sandwich in the comic. Not going to happen. Sorry. But what we did was we created we created stories about individual characters in the DC universe, and Subway was just sort of like a background consideration. The story was still fun and engaging and warm and for all audiences, and there was some soft Subway branding in the background. And the key to those things is, like, you make the human characters in the story the ones who do the shilling, not the intellectual property.
But I think something to that's interesting is, like, what you're talking about are value sets.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what is the value set of Subway? Like, what do they represent? And if you're able to take, like, that value set and then ascribe it to the story and to characters, then Subway is, like, they're being sold, but not. It is that. That's smart.
It's the quintessential soft sell.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I like it.
Very smart. You took that niche and just window of opportunity, and you just dove right on in there. That was
and that's essentially the guiding principles of my marketing agency, Modern Fanatic. Our entire gambit is that we come to conventions like this, and maybe not this year because we're all kind of getting back on our legs here, but it used to be you could walk down the street here and you would see outdoor exhibitions from brands like Geico and things like that, and they were giving out free lizards, and hey, that's a lot of fun. But 10 seconds after you walked away, you forgot about Geico, the lizard, insurance altogether, and you saw something else shiny, and you're going to get that. So we try and tell brands like that, like, it's great that you want to be in the space and you recognize that the comic convention audience and comic readers are, dimensional, viable consumers. That's great, but you have to approach them in a way that's authentic and not insulting. So if you're going to put a superhero cape on your product and call that marketing, you're gonna be in trouble. Yeah. So what we try and do is show them, don't spend $1 million, $2 million to be at this show for a very low return on your investment. Spend a fraction of that money with us, and we'll cut to the core and find the fans who are the most apt for what your mission is. And we will find ways on their terms, without insulting them, to activate them as evangelists for your brand. And it works. We've turned a lot of brands away from making what would have been big budgetary mistakes and guided them towards something a little bit more realistic.
That's brilliant. I love it. I love it. Great job. Did you want to?
I think that's really interesting. I mean, kind of bringing it to the music side, and the idea of, like, how things are. I hate to use the word viral, but I mean, it really is, for better or for worse, where you can have earworms. I think that's, like, such a big thing in music, like Baby Shark. That is a damn earworm. As much as I hate that song.
For no
but I mean,
reason.
you have these things that connect us to each other and to storytelling and to a brand. And I think as we go into the future, brands are going to become more and more in the background. I think that's going to be the key for brand success. And I know this isn't about branding. We're not on a panel about branding, about music. But I think it really is something interesting, going back to this, like, sort of transmedia, multimedia, storytelling, is that you need all of these facets to really be able to tell these kind of multi-dimensional stories, from music and kind of brand values and all those elements. So I think it's.
I mean, even as an artist, it's invaluable to find those your niche group, your people, your 1,000 true fans, so to speak, right? So that's
You're super fans.
your super fan. You want to
Yeah.
talk about
You
super
need
fans?
100
Are you
fans.
allowed?
I could talk a little bit about super fans. So super fans came about when I was managing a lot of the talent, and there was always this discrepancy between the artist, the label, problems they were having, and we took more of a superhero kind of approach to managing talent and giving them tools, their superpowers, to move through the game of getting into the entertainment industry. And we were caught with a lot of issues in the 90s, and I know JC, who's in the back over there, worked with me when we were going through a lot of the problems with censorship. And I'm sure you guys have been hit by some of the censors in some cases, but we were hit with censorship issues in hip hop. And Maxine Waters, who is our congresswoman out here in Los Angeles, she invited me to Congress to go speak at the Congressional Black Caucus and defend young black youth and hip hop. So I know where Gary's been instrumental in creating that storytelling through Snowfall. But when all this stuff was going on, there was a lot of pushback. So you had the industry pushing back on the voice of the culture, and I realized at a young age, at 24, 25, that I had to really figure out which side I wanted to be on, if I was going to be on the label side or the artist side, and I chose to be on the artist side and to defend the artist's freedom of speech, and I think we're seeing when a superhero or a comic book, where you have the dualities of somebody's superpowers or what they're burdened by, or their it gives you an opportunity through music to really translate that into all different mediums. So what Superfans does is we take all of your social media and we aggregate all of that information and put it in one centralized place, giving the artist and the creator superpowers. So you're able to have a shortcut to greatness in some respect using our Superfans platform. So that's a little bit
You
about
market
what
test.
we market test talent
Yeah.
through gameplay, tasks and dares, seeing if you can really compete in the game of music or entertainment.
Yes. So I just got my sign for 15 minutes. Do we have any questions so far? Does anybody have any questions for us? Go ahead, sir.
One quick comment and then a question. Comment, Chris, I have read your Batman and Claritin story. Let me tell you, it's nothing to sneeze at. So,
I love it.
in terms of the history of comic books and music, and Gary, you mentioned some of your historical work that you've done. I can think immediately of some artists, whether it's Paul McCartney or Donovan or Alice Cooper, who were referencing comics in their songs. At what point did the comics industry realize that there was a connection? I can't think, other than like an occasional panel with the Beatles or something. When did comics realize that there was this connection?
We probably would have to talk to the more of the comic guys. I know in the gaming side, what we were incorporating artists like you just talked about into the video game industry. It happened in the beginning of right at the beginning of the 90s. So you'd have the Mario Brothers type music, but then taking a real artist like a Soundgarden, for example, and infusing them into the games. We put a Blur, song number 2, into FIFA 2 years after the song had already burned out, and the song re-entered the charts. So we were able to go to EA and show them that music was a dominant force, almost like what Spielberg was saying, it drives it, and it re-entered the charts. So I can tell you that on the gaming side, the 90s were really that time. It was the breakthrough of them giving us, whether it be, we had EA, Sony PlayStation, Konami, THQ, Activision, all under contract to music supervise their biggest and brightest games. And it started right around 94, 95. So we were doing the NBA Live stuff, and like I said, with Wu-Tang or Jay-Z and their whole Def Jam deal. So we were doing those kind of deals where we were collaborating with the musicians and the artists to bring forth that whole wave of the video game business. But I guess you could talk to the comic book guys.
I can piggyback it and speak to it, because after you had already spoken to board members of Activision and things like that, that point, music started to develop in comics. I think visually, the way they're kind of illustrated and then develop, further into the video games aspect is a timeline of events. So.
I think Kiss. I mean,
Yeah,
we can go back.
say
I was
that.
going to say Kiss.
That was the
I
one
think
that
Kiss
captured
is
my
really
mind.
the first time that we.
70s, right?
Yeah, it was the 70s. Yeah, but I mean, I don't know.
I'm only 32.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, as a kid, for me growing up, like looking at, because I grew up on not only heavy metal magazine, but like heavy metal music. Like I was also into hip hop. But I think there was always a lot of references, especially in hip hop, to comic books. You look at like Ghostface Killah and it was like he was Johnny Blaze was Method Man, right?
Yeah.
Like so there was a lot of reference in the 90s hip hop to comics, but it was like people growing up on the comics. I think there's always been a hand in hand with comics. I mean, look, Run DMC, DMC did his book, with that was more recently. But I mean, I think graffiti and like what we did with Masters of the Sun, it was like there's always been sort of a hand in hand with comics, culture, hip-hop,
culturally,
music.
Yeah, I think maybe the initial domino was like when Marvel made the conscious decision that their comics existed in the real world, right? You know what I mean? Like when they would reference musicians from the 60s and 70s and TV shows and things like that, and then you saw like Marvel team ups with the cast of Saturday Night Live and stuff like. I think that's where like it may have gotten in our heads that they don't have to exist in a bottle.
You need to integrate the two together.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Any other questions?
Dazzler.
Yes. Yeah.
He got an applause for that one.
I could have said the Archies too. If I really
I was actually going to bring up the I was
Yeah.
like, Archie had a lot.
And
Yeah.
Josie and the Pussycats.
Yeah, Josie and the Pussycats.
Oh yeah, they had to come back, right? Riverside,
Yep,
Riverdale.
That's right.
Riverdale.
That's right.
Yeah. Oh, they're so good. Yeah. Anybody else have any questions before we wrap up? I might just sit up here and just chit chat for a minute. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, he wasn't doctored. I mean, there was, I think there's like a layer of like, you can kind of just be sitting, like in that space. Because if he had called himself Dr. Doom, but I don't know, is there ever anyone that totally took, I mean, I don't think you could take like visual, representation and then start making money off of it. But I think there's always been a reference.
I can't remember who it was now. Actually, somebody mentioned this to me the other day. Some rock group had used the Silver Surfer on the
Joe
cover.
Satriani.
Is that what it? Okay. Yeah. But I imagine they must have paid the rights for that. I assume.
Yeah, I'm sure they did.
You can't infringe on the you can't infringe on a copywritten work whatsoever. I mean, we had these problems, with music, where producers used to say, and JC knows about this. With producers, they would say that if you put, you can take X amount of seconds of the song. Well, I used to get censored all the time, where the label would say, you have too many samples on your record.
Right.
And my guys were signing off, they had no samples. And then we had to send it to a musicologist, and there was 32 samples on two songs.
Yeah,
so there's a lot of issues, so you can't infringe on the copyright whatsoever, even at creative work whatsoever. But if you put the needle to the record, it's like if you steal $1 from the bank, you still rob the bank. So that was the kind of thing. You have some creative liberties, but you have to get licenses and clearance.
Yeah, you can't just change the pitch and then change the BPM. Yeah.
And then it often comes up with, on Snowfall, where we want to use a certain song, and because the song obviously is associated with the artist, and so then it's like the fee is way up here,
Yeah.
right? You would get mechanical rights,
Right.
but we don't want mechanical rights.
No.
And we need a song that everybody knows by that artist, sung by that, you know.
Well,
Does it have to be sung by that
there's
artist, or
always-
does the covers work too?
Yeah.
So I was just gonna say too, like even in the writing, like in this last issue I'm finishing up right now, I put a Black Eyed Peas song in, like literally wrote it in there. So I'm seeing if legal comes back on me.
Yeah.
Like I'm just kind of seeing if I can
See
sneak
if
it
he
in.
notices.
But I mean, I'd be like, yo, like.
Because you for sure could get that
Yeah, I mean, we
license.
should be able to get the rights to it, but I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, it should be fine. But I mean, it is that thing of like when you put songs into it. Like I used the in the Ghost Rider, the Spirits of Vengeance. I used what do you call it? The Set My World on Fire. It's, who is that? Not the Bottle Cap.
Wait, sing it again?
It's they used it in Fallout too.
Right.
Who is that? Set the
Ball of
world.
Fire?
It's Set the World on Fire. Anyway, I use the
Oh,
lyrics in the thing, and I have Johnny Blaze is sing, and Ketchum is singing it, and anyway, I got away with it. I was able to put the lyrics into it. I think it was might have been the comic copy.
We actually worked on a film together, and Victoria was writing the lyrics of her song "Monster" into this movie, and the guys just ran with it and added the song into the lyrics, so I thought that was pretty cool.
That was awesome. Yeah, I was really excited.
That was a lot
about
of fun. But you got to have something like that happen. And with movies and TV, they're so far along that you have to get, they're writing the music in, but the movie doesn't come out for a year. So all that stuff.
Have you ever just heard a song and not necessarily like it, but when you see it in a film and it fits in the exact right way, you're just like, ooh, that's a bop right there.
Yeah, I would say that the mood that it kind of sets, even for the characters, it kind of provides an inspiration for the whole entire story.
Right. Okay, so we have 5 minutes left. Really quick.
It was the ink spots.
Who
The
was
ink
it?
spots.
I don't want to see the world on fire. Of
So
course.
that's how I think I got away with it because it was an old song.
Really?
Snuck it in.
Stuck it in. That's perfect.
I love it. Okay, so if everybody can go and follow, it's superpower_enterprises on Instagram. The first 3 people who like it will win this masterpiece next to Davian. It's yours, everybody. It's superpower_enterprises.
There you go.
Hey.
No other questions, guys? We good?
Is there any more questions? We have like maybe 2 minutes left.
JC, I heard you had a question in the back. What was your question?
Ooh, what's that?
Yes, we are very well. What?
Oh, no.
Thank you, guys. Thank you,
Yeah.
guys.
On that note, yeah.
Right, yeah.
Thank you very
This
much.
took a left turn really
very much.
quick. But thank you guys so much for coming to the panel. We
Thank you,
appreciate
Victoria.
it.